The top 10 mistakes in the Nancy Guthrie investigation. It's not just us, the talking heads, the people with a background in policing that are talking about it. The broadcast media is all over it. And you folks, the true crime community, everyone is pointing out mistakes to me. So tonight, we're going to take a hard look at the investigation into the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie. Now, let me be very clear. Investigations are very complicated. Detectives and agents are working around the clock, and hindsight is always 2020. But when a case reaches this point, weeks without an arrest, limited forensic breakthroughs, and increasing public concern, it's important to analyze what may have gone wrong. From a law enforcement investigative perspective, these are the top 10 mistakes or potential mistakes in the Nancy Guthrie investigation. And a quick reminder, if you're looking for real crime insight, not YouTube theories, this channel is different. I'm a retired NYPD sergeant on Police Off the Cuff. We analyze cases the way cops and prosecutors do, what matters, what doesn't, and what the internet gets wrong. If that's the perspective you want, subscribe now, because this isn't entertainment, it's experience. In addition, folks, we'd like to remind you that the Police Off the Cuff podcast is sponsored by FanDuel on the Believe Network. So, folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your service dog, hold on to your thoughts, because we're going to pick your brain here. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the Off the Cuff zone, the Police Off the Cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
I'm so happy today to not be flying solo. And with me today is retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney at law. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Bill. Good afternoon. Good to see you. Thank you for having me on.
Well, I'm glad you're with me today, Mike. I flew solo yesterday, and I can't tell you, even though the audience is fantastic, how difficult that is to fly solo sometimes. It really is. And I'm not complaining. I love doing this show, and I love our audience, and I love the topic. So one of the things, Mike, everyone has been, look, this is day 29. So we're in a month since 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie was kidnapped. There's been every criminal justice, police, FBI, ATF, everyone with any background in criminal justice has weighed in on this case. And a lot of the audience has weighed in, and the public, and of course, broadcasters. Broadcasters never look at themselves in the mirror. They want to point blame at the popo, at the police, because the police make mistakes all the time. And Mike, not to say that there weren't lots of mistakes in this case. There were, and there is, and there will continue to be, because every investigation has mistakes. But perhaps if we could cut down on the mistakes, that maybe we'd have a different outcome than where we are right now. And it doesn't seem we're any closer right now to arresting someone than we were on February 1st. Your thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, Bill, you have to have a certain investigation. You've been through this many times before, and you don't want the newspapers, the print media, all the YouTubers and everything to get in your face and be interfering with what you're doing and have leaks come out of an investigation. We've seen how great investigations can keep their cards close to the vest. We've seen that with the Koberger case and a few others. And in this case here, it seemed that right off the bat there was some miscommunication, confusion. A lot of speculation. It didn't seem like a true kidnapping and ransom. And there was so many issues in the beginning. It seemed like the message that the public got, and I hope it's not a true and accurate representation of what was going on behind the scenes, but the image that the public got was confusion and hesitation and, messaging. And that was poor off the bat. And I'm hoping that the investigation, and of course, as you say, no investigation is ever perfect. There's always going to be issues here and there. Well, you've seen it. We've had crime scenes out in the middle of the street where people are walking by, in the middle of a road in the snow and snowy weather. You have all kinds of crime scene issues that you got to deal with. But we hope that there is a lot more going on behind the scenes. And then what we see, because publicly, I can understand why people are kind of growing testy about what is going on. It's because it doesn't seem very professional the way it was handled early on.
Mike, that is the number one thing that everyone has complained about here. And that is the lack of unified command. And
Right.
if we're going to talk about that, I'll just put this up on the screen. We're going to talk about this man here, Sheriff Nanos, but I'm going to get back to him in a second. So what is needed in an investigation of this size, of this scope, of this amount of competence that you need to be the leader that is running an investigation of this size, this magnitude? I've worked numerous huge cases as big as this on the NYPD. And one of the things that is the constant, that is the most important, is the command structure. Who is actually calling the shots? And sometimes we would complain at the NYPD is that why is one police plaza, the chief of detective's office, running this case from downtown when the case is up in Harlem? Why don't they get their little penny loafers up here and run it from up here? They don't belong down at 1PP. So the centralized nature, you want an on-scene command and control center. And when you have numerous law enforcement agencies, egos, look, you can get hit with someone's ego when they enter a room sometimes. And one of the things we would always say, look, I was a sergeant. That's the first level. So were you. The first level of command on the NYPD. I know a lot of you folks believe that detective is a rank. It is not. It is not. A detective is a police officer that's an investigator. He has no authority to make command decisions. I'll put it that way. Detectives have lots of authority in the investigative realm. And if anything, I would always say to the bosses over me, listen to the detectives. They're the ones with the boots on the ground. They're the ones with the expertise. They are the ones that we should be listening to their instincts, what they're feeling, what they're saying, not one police plaza. And in this case, there was a problem not from one police plaza, but from Pima County Sheriff's Office. And I firmly believe that this man, Judge Nanos, was in way, way, way over his head, had no clue how to run this case. And he demonstrated that numerous times. And I think as a result of that, the investigation was slowed down and really some really big, major mistakes that perhaps could not be overcome once they were made. So, you always hear that expression, do it right the first time, because you never get a second chance to do it right. Your thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, Bill, I'm not going to question his competency as a police officer. I'm sure he's a very good police officer, very good, online supervisor. But in that position that he has as chief, he should have brought in as quickly as possible, and I hope he tried to, the FBI, state police, get, their expertise in this thing. But also, did the local county police, Pima County Police, did they have an emergency search, especially for like children and lost adults? Did they have some sort of procedure in place so that they could immediately go to a temporary headquarters, have a mobile command center or something like that, do that sort of thing? I would hope that they had that pre-existing. The talking to the press, immediately there should have been one person designated, maybe the person who speaks on behalf of the entire county, the person who speaks for the mayor's office and whatever, maybe borrow them, somebody with expertise so that he doesn't have to deal with the public. It should be someone else that takes the questions, and the answers will be given to that spokesperson by, say, the FBI or the state police or the Pima County Police. But to have the chief in more than maybe one interview, because we saw him like several times in evening, and it was too much. Maybe once, and that's it. Move on. Get that spokesperson in there. get them to talk about what they, and to interact with the police. Because every minute that he spends in front of a camera, that's one less minute he's not coordinating with other assets, maybe county assets, state assets, federal assets, or other county sheriffs on his level in that region of, Arizona. That's wasted time. And that's not a good look, because it turns into marathon, type of interviews. And at the podium, a lot of giving and taking, and it should just be outgoing message, 1 or 2 questions, boom, it's ended, move on. But he shouldn't be doing it.
Mike, one of the things, and I'll tell you because it's where we both come from, the NYPD, they had a pretty good way of dealing with this. If it was a major investigation, say even a police shooting, they would either have the borough commander or the person directly under the chief, directly under the borough commander. If that chief wasn't available, then the inspector. They would have them do a presentation. And one of the things necessary was also to let everyone know that the information we're giving to you is preliminary and subject to change. This way you cannot be held accountable when they say, you said this before. Yes, I did. It's since changed when we told you that. The information we're giving you right now is preliminary and subject to change. But I think with the Pima County Sheriff's Office, I don't know if he has any experience doing this whatsoever. And he really needed a PR person, if you will, because the information you disseminate, you got to be very careful with it. You can't be telling the press things that they have no business to know, right? Because it can hurt the investigation. And the word transparency doesn't belong in police investigations. The police does not owe the press transparency. And the press is dying and criticizing this. And when you give them something that's wrong, that goes against what you said, they turn on you like in a New York minute, So transparency is not owed to the press. But what is owed to them is information that is disseminated correctly and timely, and also not compromising the investigation. And I think that was one of the things, and we'll get into messaging later on, that was one of the things that really hurt this case from the beginning. And sometimes you can't correct it once you've made that mistake. This is Sheriff Nanos being questioned by Forbes magazine.
A chance to talk to you. Just broadly, like, who is in charge of this investigation right now?
Look, we are. We means we, the Pima County Sheriff's Department, along with our partners, the FBI. There's no, the egos have been put aside a long time ago. Our whole goal in this is not about the sheriff or being elected, or it is focused on finding Nancy. That's all this is. This other distraction, white noise, whatever you want to call it, I don't even know where it comes from. But, and you're right, there's a reason I wasn't talking to you all, and I don't mean just your team. I'm talking all these teams. The reason we're not talking, meaning I said that at our last press conference. We have a lot of work to do. But when somebody comes out, in my opinion, somewhat irresponsible, and makes stories up that are just wild, has no basis for it, that put a division between those teams that are working hard 24/7. Got over 400 cops out here working every minute of the day. We said at the last briefing with you all, the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department are joined at the hips. We have done this for not years, decades. We look at that relationship as very vital, not just to each agency, but to our community. See, when this is all gone, when you guys are gone, we're still here. The Pima County Sheriff's Department will be here. The FBI will be here. Those relationships matter to us. So that's the only reason I came out was, guys, we're doing everything we can humanly possible. I think it's over 30-some thousand leads now. we're grateful for that. That's what you guys did for us. And we're grateful, and we continue doing it. We continue asking for that, because when those leads dry up, where are we at, right? We want to find Nancy. This story of the FBI being blocked, the sheriff blocked, I would never. Why would I do that? Why would any people are offering me help for free? The FBI, local law enforcement here, the state, all over the place. Corporate America, Google, my own lab, which starts this.
You know, I just want to say something. He doesn't engender a great deal of confidence in me. I mean, he's trying to be very frank, but he's coming off not, in my opinion, not putting out confidence in the investigative process there. Didn't Shakespeare once say, "You doth protest this too much"? Well, I think he's saying too much that the FBI is our partners. We get along. You know, we're buddies. You know, we're having ice cream sandwiches together. No, there's definitely a feeling that there's some animosity and there's some egos and some headbutting between the Pima County Sheriff and the FBI. And the evidence of that is that I believe in the very beginning of this investigation, he didn't call the FBI for several days, and he did not share evidentiary information with the FBI. That's not consistent with what he's saying here. You know, he's tiptoeing through the tulips, and it's not consistent, Mike.
Yeah, the reporter asked a question, and rather than say yes, no, and give one or two sentences, if you watch it, he's going on and on and on and on, going down all different rabbit holes, and it's like therapy. It's like he's at a bar with a drink with a buddy, eating pretzels, watching TV, and saying, yeah, this is this and that's that, and solving the world's problems. It's ridiculous. That should have been a 10-second clip. Boom, move on. That is not the way. That does not engender confidence. And as you say, there was issues right off the bat early on, and maybe unfortunately, Pima County got caught flat-footed and didn't have whatever resources they needed, or didn't have the proper protocols in place, or didn't really see it as for what it was, that it could have actually just been a poor lady wandering around in the desert somewhere. Whatever it wasn't handled well from the beginning. And in this case, when he's trying to explain, he's, as you say, he's explaining way too much. This is just nonsensical is what he's doing here.
From the chat, Dragonfly Lady 8031, Bill, why do you think Savannah Guthrie and family never did a press conference with law enforcement? Well, because the law enforcement, that's not what they do. If they're going to give a press conference, they're going to give it on their own behalf, not on behalf of the family. And if the family wants to do a press conference, they could do it on their own. They can't marry those two together for numerous reasons. I want to get back to the mistakes. And for me, and this was a little pet peeve of mine. When we watch this case, now it's moved out of Tucson, and the command and control center is now out of Phoenix, Arizona. That disturbs a lot of people, because at the top of this investigation, it was reported to be over 400 investigators. Now, I don't know what they cut it down to, but you also saw the amount of press that was at this location was ridiculous, right? They had drone shots that looked like a Sunday afternoon NFL parking lot. That's what it looked like on the blocks. Who allowed that? Mike, who allowed that to happen?
That's the county.
Yes, exactly. That was a huge shitstorm of what should never have been allowed. That's Sheriff Nanos. So if you want to, again, point the finger, and all of a sudden, after 28 days, he decides we want them out of there. So now there's no more parking allowed on the street. Anyone that does gets a $250 fine. It's too late. You should have enacted that week number one before it became an NFL football Sunday parking lot, with the press trouncing all over the crime scene. There is reportedly 20 gloves similar to the one wearing by the perpetrator caught on the ring camera that were turned in. What does that mean? That means people are just throwing gloves the hell away. None of those, it turns out, yet have been declared evidence. But that's because all of these people were unvetted and they were all just rolling around all over the place. That is the command structure of a large investigation, where you have to marry your investigators with your patrol personnel and control the crime scene and control the area around the crime scene. That was not done here. Huge mistake. Huge mistake. Mike.
Yeah, if you are going to involve like volunteers, good-natured people that just want to do help, want to help out because Mrs. Guthrie's a neighbor, and maybe there are local people who know the area, and you're going to do a search through some wild brush, and say you have police officers supervising that, and you meet with them, you give them some training, you tell them what to do, you give them a stick, you give them a flashlight, a vest, whatever you do, you give them some gloves. You have to have protocol to safeguard, to tell them what to do, have them follow it, and turn in everything. And there was a report that most of the gloves were from volunteers, taking them off and just throwing them, disposing of them. What it costs, it's going to cost probably $5,000 to $8,000 per glove, at least, to do a DNA test to see whether or not it was dropped by a perp or dropped by a known person who was a volunteer. It was like they got caught flat-footed. They didn't know what to do, and it ends up making all the police, federal and local, look like the Keystone Cops. And I don't appreciate that, because there is a way to handle protocol. And so you've done searches, I've done searches before, and there's a way to control it. But it didn't seem like there was any real control of people who are volunteering to help, and also just curious onlookers and YouTube people who are making content and blocking streets. And if I may, following the police around. We saw this when they took out the emergency service truck. And they did that they did 2 stops one night, and it was like a caravan. You got to have protocols in place. They didn't have it.
From the chat, and Shirley Keenbaum 4311. I'm sorry, I don't know if you made some typos here. Well, the sheriff is going to switch their only, I think, one person out there from the press. You cannot deny press. Yes, you can deny the press. All right. Law enforcement determines the size, the breadth, and the width of the crime scene, right? If law enforcement determines that they want the press back 1,000 or 2,000 feet from the crime scene, they have the authority to do that. There was press walking up onto the steps of Nancy Guthrie's home. That's ridiculous. That's outrageous. They were all over the damn property. What's going to happen? They're going to discard their garbage. They're going to discard things that they don't know how it got there. Well, guess what? You didn't protect the damn crime scene. That's how things got there, that now you're questioning, 4 weeks later, look at this. Who left that there? Well, you had thousands of people from the press all over there, and you didn't move them back. That's like a pet peeve of mine. It really is, because I've dealt with it on the NYPD, where the press would actually walk into a bloody murder scene and be like, who the hell will let you come up these stairs? And there has to be control, or else you lose the whole scene, Mike.
Yeah, the press conference is where the press gets to ask their questions, and they've got great camera lenses. They could film from 500 yards away or 1,000 yards away, whatever. They could do that. They could request statements that are written down, announcements. They could do all that. They don't have the right to interfere with the investigation. Interfering means, trampling over crime scene, deliberately walking past crime scene tape. We've seen it before, and you're like, you'll tell somebody, get back. You'll turn your back, attend to the crime scene, and you turn around again, and they're behind the crime scene tape again. It's like, excuse me, could you get behind the crime scene? And this is what goes on. And sometimes people don't realize it because they haven't done it, but the press has their place. They have a right to information at press conferences that are controlled, and so that not too much information, some sort of strategic information, clues and things about the crime that only the perpetrator might know, that gets left off. And have the press if they could have a news conference, half hour every day with a spokesperson, whatever it is, but carefully controlled, but they don't get to trample around and interfere with what the police are doing. That's not freedom of the press. That's not the First Amendment.
Absolutely. Pauline Buckles, 2310. That's true. Brian Enton shouldn't have walked right up to the front door.
Yeah.
Well, Pauline, he's going to do what he gets away with.
Yeah.
And no one stopped him from doing that. So therefore he's going to do it. And he did do it. And was that wrong? Yeah. From his perspective, absolutely not. No one told him not to do it. And, he's going to do what he's going to do. This is from ABC News.
Disappeared into the video from doorbell cameras, the vehicles in those early morning hours. One car seen on a ring cam within minutes of Guthrie's disappearance. Authorities tonight say it's this kind of video they still need, with Savannah Guthrie posting tonight about the family's $1 million reward and the ability to stay anonymous. Here's Trevor Ault.
Nearly 1 month after Nancy Guthrie was abducted from her home, tonight Savannah Guthrie is renewing her plea for the critical tip that could lead to her mother, posting, "Please be the one that brings her home."
We need to know where she is. We need her to come home.
Savannah telling any potential tipster they can stay anonymous and still get her family's $1 million reward.
You can be anonymous if you want. Someone out there knows something that can bring her home. Somebody knows. And we are begging you to please come forward now.
Investigators are still hoping someone can identify the masked man with a gun at Nancy Guthrie's doorstep the night she was taken. If your tip qualifies for the reward, you can be paid in cash. When you make a tip, they provide a PIN number you'd present when picking up the money at a neutral location. No ID required, and it's not traceable with no questions asked.
Pima County Sheriff's Department.
Tonight, the Sheriff's Department is looking into videos like this one from Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood, a ring video obtained by Fox News showing a car 2.5 miles from the home at 2:36 a.m., around the time Nancy was taken. Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker disconnected from her phone 8 minutes earlier at 2:28 a.m. That car is one of 12 captured on that camera between midnight and 6 a.m. Police have not said it has any connection to the abduction, but it's the kind of video investigators are asking residents to send them as they work through thousands of hours of footage.
And so, Mike, there's another thing right there. 28 days into the investigation, and this home had ring camera video of 12 cars that were going away from the scene about 8 minutes after the Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker device had disconnected from the Wi-Fi, which is a good timestamp.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why did it take 28 days to find that ring camera? Well, guess why? Because someone made the decision, we're just going to do a perimeter of 2 miles in either direction from Nancy Guthrie's house. Why was that arbitrarily the distance? I mean, that's part of another mistake that was made. An exhaustive canvas of video camera all over. Cars, move fast, right? So 2.5 miles is not a long distance from her house. And if that is the exit and entry necessary to go to her house, then why would you limit it to 2 miles away? Another big mistake, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, I understand people have said that the area is very countrified. There's not a lot of street lights. There's not a lot of traffic cameras. But go to the nearest highway, wherever that is. If it's 5 miles away, 10 miles away, maybe there's a really wide boulevard with traffic cameras, 3 miles away. You go there. And then if you see what you see around that time, and find out if you could get license plates, where's the nearest toll plaza where somebody would have to go through with their Easy Pass? That sort of thing had to be done. Limiting it to 2 miles in a very countrified area isn't going to give you much. And the sad thing is, if this car that we see in those two quick clips, if it is in fact part of the crime, coming and going, perhaps, that would have been much more valuable. It's valuable now, but it would have been much better had we had that within the first 48 to 72 hours. I think you're right. The parameters of the crime scene were, for traffic purposes, were set up way too small. Definitely.
Absolutely. Evidence disclosure issues, talking out a big mistake, right? We learned that a glove was recovered at the crime scene on day one, but was not initially disclosed to the FBI. This is a serious issue. In modern investigations, every piece of evidence must immediately go into the joint investigative pipeline because the glove could potentially hold DNA, touch DNA, fiber, skin cells, trace evidence.
Mhm.
And if federal forensic resources had access immediately results might have been differently. And the glove was sent to the Pima County lab that they use in Miami instead of to the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia. This is sort of, not having a cohesive investigative process. Instead, you're all over the place. And not only is that not sound investigative and crime scene processing, but it also creates animosity in regards to the other investigative law enforcement agency that is working with you. Mike.
Yeah, I think if there had not been a hesitation in the beginning at the FBI and Pima County called them in, called the state police in early, much earlier, you would not have had this issue, because if they found the glove, they would have said to the FBI, "Look, we have a lab in Florida, but could you guys do it, because you are the FBI, you've got all the money, you've got all the tools and stuff, and work with them." But most likely the timeline was the glove was found, I believe, and it was already sent to the lab in Florida, and the FBI then came on board and wanted the glove back, and I think it was already sent. That creates tension right off the bat, because you're going to call the FBI in, you're going to call them in for all that scientific and mechanical stuff that you don't have, all the budget and all the good toys that you don't have because you're a county. And even if the state doesn't have it, but this is what happens if you don't get off on the right foot. There are mistakes made, and I hope that the lab results from Florida were as accurate. I'm sure it was retested in Quantico, and that the accurate results were there. But you should have had, this is one unified command. You call in the FBI, you run the investigation, but anything technical in scientific, whatever, you give it to them because they have the budget and the ability to do it. This is a problem with calling them in late. A lot of problems could have been avoided if they had called in the FBI right off the bat.
Absolutely. At Kiana Lee Mag, how do we really know this wasn't done? Sounds like we're all just saying a million things that they did wrong. I like my FBI and sheriff don't defund them. No one's talking about defunding them.
No.
We're talking about things that were done incorrectly in the investigation from our perspective, from a police perspective. And we're not looking to beat anybody up. We're looking to identify areas that could have been done better and perhaps might have resulted in better results. Because right now, we're day 29 into the investigation of the kidnapping of an 84-year-old woman that is nowhere, at least from our perspective, from the public's perspective, from those on the outside looking in. Maybe for those on the inside looking out, maybe they're much closer to solving this case than we realize. But from our perspective, it doesn't seem like that, Mike.
Yeah. Nobody's talking about defunding or anything like that. It's just, as you say, you've said many times, you sometimes don't get an opportunity to go back and do it right the first time. If you make up a mistake right off the bat, this is where better protocols, more timely using those protocols, calling up the county, the state, or the feds early on. Everybody knows, even if this wasn't a kidnapping and there was no ransom, if this is an elderly lady who needs heart medication or a missing 5-year-old from kindergarten, it's the same kind of protocol. All hands on deck. Whatever you need, all the resources go. You have the temporary headquarters, you have your volunteers, you have them, and you call in all the favors you can as a department, and including the FBI. And then that will take care of itself. And then you get off to a good start. But when you're backtracking and then you release the crime scene after like one day, you take down all the crime scene tape. Brian Enton goes in, he gets the money shot, the blood right there. Boom, that's all over the media. Then you go try to put up the crime scene tape. You've made many faults. And unfortunately, we can hope that no viable, reliable evidence was destroyed. But in hindsight, you've ruined your relationship perhaps with somewhat with the FBI, somewhat with the press, somewhat with the public, and you can't go back sometimes. And it's not a do-over. Sometimes
Mike, I was thinking do-over, or in golf, a mulligan. You get a second
right, a mulligan,
shot, right?
Right.
Or the old expression that I love this expression: you can't put the genie back into the bottle.
Right.
And it's so true. At SD 0224, police off the cuff. Can you explain why law enforcement still has Annie's car? I don't know specifically, but they determine whether or not the vehicle is still needed as per the investigation. And if they haven't released it, then someone who is in authority has decided to hold on to it, which means there could be numerous more questions. Isn't that the car that dropped off her mother the night when she was last seen?
Mm-hmm.
Look, it's still not known officially by law enforcement how the perpetrators got in the house. That's never been released. And many people in the press have tried to get Sheriff Nanos to say, oh, there was a break-in. And I think earlier on he may have said something like that, there was evidence, but then he pulled it back. So we don't know specifically how the perpetrators, and I say traitors because I believe this was more than one person, how he entered the home. Mike.
Yeah. I think the term they may have used early on was forced entry, whatever, which could be anything from climbing through a skylight, sneaking in a basement door, breaking a lock with a sledgehammer, getting into a window, with a Slim Jim. It could be anything. Yeah, he did walk it back. And that's one of the things that you really don't want to let the press know, because if you do get a suspect and you're questioning them and they're talking, one of the things you would ask them is, well, then how did you actually get in? And if it hasn't been released, that person is telling the truth if they tell you exactly how they got in, and how they got in. So certain things you don't put out there. But the holding the car, there's some evidence that maybe they're waiting for some sort of toxicology test, a blood test, a DNA test, that sort of analysis. But that for whatever reason, they're holding that car because that car is valuable enough to the investigation not to release it. Because once you release it, as we've seen, it's all over.
It's compromised and it can't ever be used as evidence again. At Mermaid 2605, is there a law that states an adult person must be missing a certain amount of time before it is considered a missing person? Absolutely not. However, there is a lot of confusion, because someone who is 18 years of age or older has the freedom to come and go as they please. So unless there is some other circumstances that indicate that this person is missing, the person is not missing. What do I mean? Foul play. Person indicated, an intention of committing suicide. Person was not of sound mind. And then you would get like an immediate search. But other than that, and that a lot of law enforcement agencies do turn people away, and that they talk about the 24-hour rule. That's not true. They just push the public away by saying that, oh, you got to wait 24 hours. You do not. But most people, look, if law enforcement took every single missing person, they would do nothing but missing person cases. So that's why they turn a lot of people away. But foul play or an involuntary disappearance, mentally or physically unstable, all of those things, law enforcement should get right on the case. And of course, under the age of 16, all of those things are reasons to take an immediate missing person case. Mike.
Yeah, people don't understand that missing person cases are very labor intensive. You're going to get, I remember doing this in my precinct in the Bronx. You get a report, say 10 o'clock at night, of a missing child. You set up the temporary headquarters, you call the transit police, you call the housing police, you call all the precincts in the area where that person may have gone within the last time they were seen, hour, 2 hours, whatever happens to be. And you get everybody looking for this person, besides doing whatever other work they have to do. You get everybody looking for this person. You get bosses there, and you're getting resources like harbor, aviation. In fact, in one particular case, they found the body in a bag in the river after like 24 hours. So you're dedicating a lot of assets. So that's why some police departments may be a little reticent to sit there and say, okay, we're going to take on that missing persons case. But at the NYPD, we learned hard lessons that there is no 24 hours. If there's any indication at all, either that it's a young child or an elderly person, as you said, unsound mind, threats made against them, whatever happens to be, they're a special category. That is all in, and everybody is working on that case, and you don't stop until you get that person. But many times people just disappear because they've been out drinking for a weekend, and they'll come home, so it's difficult. But anytime that there's a special category person, the police department should say, okay, we're going to do it now. We're going to start right now.
I think one of the number one mistakes that I see, that I've been harping on from minute one, is the messaging that went down with this case, not getting out the proper message, not giving press conferences at regular intervals, instead going on and being interviewed by different stations, different board. That's a huge mistake, because you're putting out different messages to different people. Let's have one cohesive message, and one message going out to all the broadcast media. This is a very, very complex case. So you have to do things by the numbers, or it confuses the whole investigation and it creates animosity among law enforcement. Professor Mike.
Yeah, even Sheriff Nanos talked about, how this could create animosity. It's annoying when people are saying, because look, years ago you had the regular print media and you had the regular news station, say in New York, and you'd get to know these people by sight. That's one thing. But now, years, decades later, you've got a lot of YouTubers, and some of them are excellent. They do fantastic work, and they're really analytical. They really know their stuff. But then you get a lot of people who are just winging it and saying stuff, and they're putting out messages that aren't true. I can't tell you in this case how many things I've seen looking for information on the internet where people are just saying the wildest things. They're blaming things on, Elvis practically for taking Nancy. It's ridiculous stuff. And, Nanos is right. They shouldn't be there, but neither should the sheriff be paying any attention to what is actually being said. That's for a spokesperson to correct, not the chief. Definitely not the chief.
Absolutely. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, share us, like, make lots of comments. It helps our algorithm, helps our show grow. If you want to contribute financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels. We also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels, and you can join the Police Off the Cuff YouTube family. This is from local Fox station in Tucson.
Our Fox News Digital was able to obtain these images of 12 cars between midnight and 6 a.m., including some cars at 2:30 when her pacemaker unsynced from her Apple Watch or iPhone, indicating perhaps that was when she was taken out. And then when she was taken out of her house, David, it's really, shocking that we haven't been given these images by the sheriff's department, 4 weeks ago, say. I understand that these images were taken maybe about 2 miles from her house, but what do you make of this?
Yeah, thanks for having me again. The situation was this: when they started the canvas, the extended video canvas, they went about 1.5 miles. So when they went that 1.5 miles, this video was not obtained by the sheriff's office or been put in the depository because they never asked for anything past that 1.5 mile mark. So this was about 2 miles away. And the benefit was, I mean, the good thing is that the person who had this video notified, the police, notified the sheriff's office, FBI and sheriff went to the house. They obtained the video. And as you can see, there's a timestamp on it. You've seen several vehicles go within a particular time frame. There are people out there already trying to identify the vehicles at this time. I always tell people wait until the experts do that, because I know we'll have experts identify what vehicles were there or what type of vehicles. We cannot even determine whether or not those vehicles that were located on that camera connect to the house yet. So that's the thing we're looking at. Is this a good lead? Absolutely. It's better than we've had so far. The glove, we found out we don't have anything really valuable of value on the glove yet. This is something that may be valuable to find out how they abducted Nancy and took her away.
Yeah, it's really incredible that we are almost 1 month into her disappearance, in the middle of the night, pulled out of her bed. I mean, it's really just shocking. Yeah, now we're looking at images of her house. I want to ask you about this $1 million reward that was somewhat new this week. How will that get someone to come forward with information, and why didn't they do it sooner?
Well, you're hoping that, and from my understanding, is the Guthrie family was told by the sheriff's department not to put out money for it because it would have added to more leads. They were thinking they get their leads as organic as possible, meaning you have people who actually care enough that don't worry about the money. But now at this point in this juncture in time, we have to look for bad actors. So with these bad actors who may have information, because remember one note was sent to TMZ asking for Bitcoin for information. Now they've upped the ante and upped that reward to over $1 million. Maybe that will have those bad actors who may have been tertiarily involved, who don't want to get arrested, may be involved in this and get those tips. And apparently about 1,000 or so tips have come in since that reward is put out. And not only that, you're dealing with video footage. Apparently they have almost 10,000 hours worth of video that has been put in the depository. This video they obtained is pretty new, and they didn't have it. So you're seeing a lot of changes with the dynamic of the investigation. It's now expanded even further than the 1.5 mile area to 2 miles, maybe go a little farther than that.
I mentioned that before. Whose decision was it? The 1.5 miles, or I thought it was 2 miles, and the camera that they got the images of the cars was 2.5 miles. Who made that arbitrary decision to make it just limited to 1.5, 2 miles, whatever it was? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Cars can get 2.5 miles away very quickly. So why was that arbitrarily chosen as that distance, Mike?
Maybe it's protocol. Maybe they have it set as protocol. Maybe this was suggested by the FBI, but I wouldn't think that would be suggested that small an area by the FBI. This is where a traffic engineer from the county could tell you, this is the traffic patterns in our county. Here's this main road. This is that. And if you want to get to Nancy Guthrie's house and get away, coming from east or coming from west or north or south, these are the exits and streets you would more likely to take. And then you get to Nancy Guthrie's house. That's the center of the wheel, and you move out. But yeah, it's hard to tell. 2 miles is, especially on a country road, and this is a fairly very, very suburban and maybe remote area. You got to go farther than that. Definitely.
And Mike, in addition, these homes are far away from each other.
Yeah.
It's not like homes that are on top of each other. These homes could be, 1,000 yards away from each other. So what is 2 miles and when the homes are that far? And all of the information relative to vehicles, obviously the perpetrator or perpetrators had to get to the scene via a vehicle. He didn't walk there, absolutely did not walk there. So that all of this stuff, again, we can consider it a mistake in the investigative canvassing. I mean, you have 400 bodies on the scene. The canvassing should have been going on heavy duty in the first few days after she went missing, not after the fact, not 3 weeks later. You say, hey, look what we found. We think it's this car, or a car that looks like this may have been at Nancy Guthrie's house that night. They find that out on the 24th or the 28th. Ridiculous. That should have been found much earlier, Mike.
Yeah, there's a lot of time for some ne'er-do-well to destroy things, get rid of them, crush it, bury it, and all different ways to get rid of that car. Paint it, whatever you want to do to it, but you got to be quick. And this is a fast-moving investigation, all hands on, to have this really very, very valuable, could be very valuable image, because we saw that car going back and forth in front of that house. Is that house north, south, east, or west of Nancy's house? The first time you see it, is it like 20 minutes after or 20 minutes before we see the guy in the video, and maybe we see the car going back the other way 15 minutes later? What does the timestamps tell you and the location tell you? All of the stuff would have been really much. It's valuable now, but it could have been much more valuable earlier on. And at this point, a lot of time has gone on, and unfortunately, maybe some of this evidence that could have been recovered, hopefully isn't, but it could be destroyed.
Absolutely. Back to the Fox News report here.
The FBI has moved most of their work to the outside offices, I think to Phoenix. They're still doing the dynamic technical aspect, but you have to realize the sheriff's office is very, the resources are limited.
Yeah.
So it takes time to get these things done.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why people are so frustrated that more progress hasn't been made, especially after we got that big break of the image, of the bad guy that they're looking for, that appears to have been trying to break into her house the night that she disappeared. What happens next in this case? Because we also got reports today that the feds, the FBI, and the sheriff's department may be ready to turn the crime scene back over to the family, to the house. So does that mean a stall in the case? I mean, it's really alarming, especially for those who knew her.
Yeah, with the issue of the crime scene, and was it an issue about releasing it too early already and having the media go to it? I'm the detective. I don't release a scene until I feel comfortable that we have everything, and I mean everything, top to bottom, from rooftop down to wherever you got to go into that house. That's one thing. They've been there for over 3.5 weeks. Hopefully, they've obtained enough evidence, and I don't know how they got any evidence from that house. We don't really know what they obtained. Everyone's like, we get DNA. Understand this. DNA is invisible to the eye. So when you talk about DNA retrieval, you're talking about places where contact was made by somebody. And in that house, was there anything outstanding in the contact, the abduction of Nancy Guthrie, that would have had someone leave something behind? And that's why that video footage of the suspect who did the abduction, who's what you see, he's trying to avoid as much forensic evidence to be left, namely fingerprints, DNA, wearing a ski mask. And you've also saw the other footage where you saw someone in similar appearance without that backpack. We don't know the date and time. I hope that the feds and the sheriff's office have a date and time for that individual, because that then can help tie in the vehicles that are seen on the video and maybe find vehicles similar to vehicles that went around that location, because you had to leave there somehow. You had to come back there somehow. So that's something you're going to look at too, to see if you can identify vehicles that are leaving that day that the viewer, or at least that witness, in a sense, the ear witness, visual witness, got that video. Now you're trying to compare it to any other videos you have. And that's why you extend the canvas. The house, if you've got everything out of the house that you can, if you are comfortable and confident that happened, then you can release the scene. That's really what it comes down to. And I believe that wholeheartedly, that you only release it when you're ready to do that.
Yeah, it's really such a shame that they haven't been able to find her before now. And you can just see the devastation in the Guthrie family's posts about this. Where do we go from here? If they do give the house back, is that a sign that they're scaling back the investigation, or they'll pursue it to the ends?
Well, you've worked as much as you can for that scene. If it was an abduction, you've done the canvas, you've done the search in that area. If there's nothing else left at that location to follow up on, then if you want to move on from that, that's fine. We do that all the time. We have murder investigations in New York. We may hold the scene 2 or 3 days. Outdoor scenes are a little more difficult to hold, but an indoor scene, they've had it for 3.5 weeks. You've had many people, you had the media go into it earlier. So it's already, that issue in itself is a problem, because then you go back to try to recover evidence. that could be contaminated. There's going to be an issue with that maybe later on in the prosecution part. But now you're looking at where did they go? I call it the post incident. And that's why the concern is, was this a targeted location? And based on what the video footage we have on the prior time that this suspect was there, or a suspect was there, we see it being targeted. So they had to have figured out how to get there. And from my understanding, Tucson is very, the nighttime in Tucson or that area is pitch black.
Right.
So
light pollution there. They want to keep it that way so they can see the stars, obviously.
So, a lot of what ifs. We saw in the Idaho 4 case, not only was the house released, but it was knocked down, which we went crazy over. We just couldn't believe that. If you're not familiar with the Idaho 4 case, the owner of the home that rented it to the 4 students donated it to the university. And then the university made the decision to knock the home down because they were losing money vis-a-vis students not wanting to go to that school because of the memory of 4 students murdered in this off-campus house. But yet they didn't seem to care about the crime scene. And if the case had in fact gone to trial, how powerful it would have been for the jurors to do a walk through the crime scene was never to be for 2 reasons. A, they knocked the house down, and B, the defendant pled guilty and never went to trial. So in this case, some of you in the chat asked, why was the house released? Well, a decision was made by the investigators that they no longer needed the house for prosecutorial reasons. And if they needed it later on, they could surely go back into the house, but it's not protected any longer. Mike.
Yeah, we talked about that, the Idaho 4 case, and I think Matt Murphy even talked about it. Like, how could you possibly wait in expectation of trial, have that house torn down? Because that could, as a prosecutor, could be an amazing piece of evidence that really gives a tangible feel for the jury to see where the crime happened. In this case, I'm sure that the FBI and the county police and maybe the state police also, they sprayed luminol all over the place. They ripped up pieces of carpeting. I'm sure that house doesn't look perfectly pristine, like, Mr. Clean was there. No, that the house, they've been through it. They've worked on it. They've probably left no stone unturned. They're looking for blood underneath carpeting, in between floorboards. They're looking for all kinds of things. And so they've done that, and probably they realize that, look, everybody agrees we got everything we possibly could. We've crossed our T's, dotted our I's, and we all agreed we've gone over that house with a fine-tooth comb. That's it, and release it. And you have to live with that. And probably they would not release it. I don't think the FBI would release it until they really felt sure that that house held nothing more of evidentiary value that they didn't already have.
I think you're right, Mike. Folks, I just want everyone to know that we're doing this from a perspective of critiquing things that were done wrong. And every investigation, things are done wrong. Every investigation I've ever worked, we made mistakes. And that's the nature of being a human being. And no matter what business you're in law enforcement, you're in medicine, you're in dentistry, you're in engineering, people make mistakes, right? And, the favorite expression is that's why there's an eraser on the end of a pencil, right? People make mistakes. But when you make a mistake, you have to correct it. And this case is tough because it involves the kidnapping, and many people are saying it now. No one was saying it till very recently, that the chances that she's found alive are very, very, very slim at this point. And I think even the Guthrie family knows that now. And we're all saddened by that. We're tremendously saddened. And this is the nature of law enforcement and of investigating horrific crimes like this. So what are we? We're the Monday morning quarterbacks, right? We're not in the huddle. We're not calling the plays, but we're critiquing it after the fact. And sometimes that feels good. It's much easier than being in the huddle and being the one that's being criticized. Mike, as much as this is an unbelievable case as far as for the investigators, for the FBI, for the Pima County Sheriff's Office, but it's a little frustrating it hasn't been solved yet. I thought it would be solved by now, and I still believe they will solve this case. When? I cannot say. Mike, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I too believe that they will solve this case. But unfortunately, I also agree that there's a very distinct possibility, without any proof of life having been offered for the past 30 days, that the real possibility exists that poor Nancy, an 84-year-old grandma, has perished, has passed away. So we have to confront that. But if you are, a true crime person, like Bill and I, and you're frustrated, hey, we are too. But we do believe that this will be solved.
And if it's any solace, it's not for lack of trying.
Right.
But there's no almost in investigations, There's hard evidence, and you either solve it or you don't. There's not almost solved it. So, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff on behalf of myself and Professor Mike Geary. Have a great day, everyone, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.